Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Guinness, Head of Sustainability at Hummingbird Technologies. We are an imagery analytics company using AI and deep learning techniques to provide valuable decision-making tools for the agri-food value chain. I'm going to give an introduction to Hummingbird from a food investment perspective, and I'm going to describe in a bit more detail what we see as one of the key engines of growth, namely sustainability, and also briefly describe fundraising plans and the capital, the capitalization of the company. Am I in charge of the slide, Sarah? Sorry, yeah, I am. Yeah. Thanks. So we are predominantly a B2B software provider. We work with larger players in the agri-food value chain, from food producers, retailers, banks, investors, and ag chem companies. The company was founded in 2016, predominantly providing precision agronomy tools to farmers, but we've evolved from there to looking at more sophisticated analytics, including the detection of sustainable farming practices and outcomes, and using big data to do things like predictive analytics, crop type classification models, and things like that. Our team is around 50 people, and roughly half of those are data scientists, and really the value of Hummingbird is not in the imagery. We don't provide satellite imagery or UAV based imagery. It's in the analytics, namely the layer of data science that turns that raw imagery into valuable decision making tools. Our kind of high level mission is to increase the sustainability of global food production, and I'm going to describe in a moment the key ways that we're looking to do that. Some of them relate to things like optimizing inputs, but also the longer term opportunity of trying to monetize and scale up agricultural carbon credits and agricultural sustainability as a potential revenue source for farmers and landowners. But really, we have one product, and that is the data science and imagery analytics, but we provide that in a number of different commercial contexts, including things like supply chain vision for food producers and retailers, as well as things like the sustainability that I mentioned, which is an application for the kind of agricultural carbon route, as well as for farmers themselves. Oh, sorry, these are in slightly the wrong order. The slide on screen really now describes that evolution of where we've come from. Initially, just more like optimizing inputs, but now we're doing more sophisticated predictive analytics and sustainability monitoring. The long-term opportunity for these sorts of technologies, we believe, will be predicated largely on the scaling up of agricultural carbon credits. We think that if the world can develop a way of monetizing regenerative agriculture, soil restoration, and sequestering carbon within soils, it can provide a potential additional income stream for farmers, whilst also improving the sustainability of food production. The problem is the verification and monitoring of these practices and outcomes. Detecting soil organic carbon from satellites is a very challenging problem, and something that Hummingbird is working on in the R&D stages. But even detecting things like no-till practices or the use of cover crops is required if it's going to be possible to verify credibly and scalably the sort of regenerative ag practices that constitute soil restoration practices. There's a groundswell of activity from both the kind of big food value chain, as well as from governments and indeed investors and lenders to increase the prevalence and adoption of these sorts of practices. And whether it's the outcomes, for example, detecting soil organic carbon or other sort of soil restoration metrics, or just verifying the practices and monitoring those at super large scale, that's a core component, and that's really what Hummingbird is looking to provide. So I think I'm probably more or less running out of time, but I may just touch on Hummingbird and the kind of fundraising perspective. We're currently sort of mid-cycle. We last raised capital in the autumn, and we are likely to be raising money again in at the end of this year. And we think that the kind of long-term engine of growth really is on this. Whilst we have we have kind of existing revenue streams with all this sort of data analytics we provide in different business units, we think that the long-term opportunity of the sustainability monitoring and positioning ourselves as a leader in sustainable farming monitoring and verification is really where we see a huge long-term opportunity.